welcome inside. Appreciate everybody being here. Good afternoon. Before we get to football, just a couple quick comments. Before we get to the big cash giveaway, I know everybody's here for that as well a little bit later, but I know it's exciting. I'd say since the last time we talked, and even going back, we talked there before training camp, talked about kind of the fragility of life and things that happen, right? We talked about Coach Knapp and his situation at that time, and unfortunately, I would say just reflecting quickly on Floyd Reese, who I would say probably Mark and John probably closest to him or know him the best, just the impact that he had on the Houston area and the Houston community, the Houston Oilers franchise, and what he did for the organization. I was fortunately able to have a personal relationship with Floyd in New England. He was an invaluable resource, a mentor, a friend. Quite frankly, taught me a lot in a short period of time, how to act with grace, how to act with humility. Never had a bad day, always had a good attitude. And his experience, I would say, as I transitioned roles, was certainly something that having that voice or that presence right down the hall, was certainly valuable and appreciated. So, again, I know not everybody knew Floyd, not everybody had a relationship with Floyd, but I think his impact on the Houston community and the Houston area spoke volumes. And I think it's, whenever you lose a life or lose somebody, it's always good to reflect on the good that they did and that they provided. Secondly, I think as we look at some of the recent events, those people that have been displaced and impacted and affected by the hurricane in Louisiana, I would say I'm sure all of you have some friends here in Louisiana. We have some folks on our staff, quite frankly, that have been affected by that. So, again, it kind of puts everything in perspective. I know I wasn't here for it, but the city of Houston experienced something similar. And, again, I think it's a reminder for all of us just each day is a blessing, an opportunity for us to be appreciative for what we have. Really, there's no bad days. Some days are better than others. There's no bad days. So I think it's important for, send our thoughts and prayers to the state of Louisiana and the folks that are affected. And I know there's a number of Houstonians that are doing their part to help and as best they can. On the football side of things, where we are, again, it's been about a month since we had the opportunity to speak in training camp. And at that time, we didn't really know a lot or have a lot of information. I think when we started training camp, we wanted to accomplish some things as a team. When you look back at kind of what we were trying to accomplish, it's kind of put a philosophy and a foundation in place, teach our players, coaching philosophy and teach them the system, give them an opportunity to learn the system, have as much competition as possible on the team. And establish a culture and a foundation of what we're trying to do and the things that we believe in. And for the most part, on the health standpoint, try to stay healthy. So I'd say those 3 or 4 things were some, as we started training camp, were things that we were going to try to accomplish and, we're at the forefront. I'd say for the most part, we were able to do that. Again, it's never easy to reduce the roster or cut down the roster. There's always, after the fact, go back and look at it and say, okay, what could have happened? How was this decision made? There's probably 8 to 10 players that weren't on the 53-man roster that very easily could have made the team. So, again, I think a lot of it is just roster management and resource allocation. And in the end, we're always going to do what we feel is best, for our team at the time. And I'd say this will be a very fluid process. The team building process isn't going to stop because we have 53 players on the roster. That's a reality of it. I think you guys have been around here long enough here to see that that's probably not going to be the case. But again, we'll try to make smart decisions. We'll try to make good decisions as we go. I'm going to say the last thing, I know we talked about this at the start of training camp as well as it pertains to Deshaun's situation. What I would say about that is really no different than what we talked about at the beginning of training camp. Each day, we're going to make the decision that we feel is best. I would say, again, it's a one-step process. Deshaun's been here every day. He's been in training camp every day. He's been in the building. He's been in meetings. He's been around his teammates. And again, we're going to take it one day at a time. I'm not going to get into a lot of speculation about what has happened, what didn't happen. It's a waste of everybody's time, quite frankly. I think there's more important things to talk about. So, again, we're going to take it one day at a time. We're going to do what we feel is best for our team and organization. And, again, I would say there's no finite answer. There's no definitive answer here at this point, and that's how we're going to handle it. Okay? So, having said that, we'll open it up to some questions and go from there. Go ahead, John.
The decision of putting on the roster, did you have any other things you could have done other than the one you chose to do?
Again, I'm not going to get into speculation about what could or could not have happened. Again, each day we take information, we process it, and then we go about our business and try to make the right decision and the best decision at the time. So that's what we did. He's on the roster. He's on our team. Again, what does that mean moving forward? Again, it's a one day at a time, I would say, proposition and endeavor, and that's how we're going to handle it.
Nick, not trying to speculate, just trying to understand the situation a little better. If he came to you guys, you had a conversation, and he wanted to play, would he be able to play for you guys this year?
Again, I mean, I respect the question. I'm not going to get into a lot of speculation. I think any conversations that we have with the players, we'll keep that between ourselves. Again, I've had multiple conversations with Deshaun in training camp. Like I said, his attitude has been good. He hasn't been a problem. He hasn't been a disruption. So, again, we're just going to kind of take it one day at a time.
What do you have planned at wide receiver? Healthy-wise.
Yeah, John, it's a good question. What I would say when you look at the construction of the roster, you have to look at, okay, where is your depth? Is your depth on the roster? Is your depth off the roster? Okay, let's say certain positions we probably have a little bit more depth on the roster versus off the roster. Other positions, some of our depth is off the roster. I would say we're going to look at everything. We're not going to rule anything out. Again, will we have 5 receivers tomorrow? Maybe, maybe not. Will we have 5 receivers for the Jacksonville game? Probably not. Could be more, could be less. But again, you have to look at how many can you carry on the roster, where's your depth off the roster, and then really you have to look at what happens on game day. How many players can you actually take to the game? You can only take X amount of players. Certain positions are going to have more than others. So, again, where we are today, probably where we're not going to be here 2 weeks from now. So, again, we'll look at all options and we'll look at all the information. If there's an opportunity for us to improve that position somewhere on the team, that makes sense, then we'll go ahead and do it.
What's the decision for Kiki QT? What went all into that decision?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a myriad of things that always go into the decision-making process. Again, we thought in the end that was the right decision for our team. Kiki worked hard. He's a good kid. He's made some plays for the organization. Again, we can't keep everybody on the team, so we kind of have to take everything into consideration. There's always a myriad of things. It's never one particular thing. But in the end, we made the decision to release him off the roster. And that's where we are.
Deshaun hasn't practiced in weeks. Is he electing not to practice? And if he continues not to practice, would you want to avoid the guarantee?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into a commentary about an individual status or his situation. Again, we're going to take it one day at a time, Aaron, and then we'll handle it accordingly.
With QT and the inside receivers there, with the 5 that are remaining, is there confidence in Anthony Miller with that? Are you looking for more options there? Or where are you with that?
It's a good question, bro. I would say, again, how are you going to play offensively? What's the role for that particular player? Maybe it's a different type of concept or a different type of player. Maybe it's, I would say, a non-traditional player or position inside the formation. Again, when you look at inside the formation players, they come in many different shapes and sizes. Sometimes it's a receiver, sometimes it's a tight end, sometimes it's a running back. So how are you going to deploy your assets? What's the formationing look like? What does the defense do on the other side of the ball? Because that dictates maybe what you want to do, how you want to attack the defense. So, again, I would say the league, when you go through the league, and I'm sure you guys have looked at this, 65-70% of it has become kind of substituted defense and substituted offense, if you will, right? So more 11 personnel type teams versus nickel defense, right? So if you're going to be a big 3 receiver team, then maybe that position has more relevance. Maybe if you're not going to be as much of an 11 personnel team, then maybe it's not as important. I'm not saying one way or another what we're going to be, but again, you have to look at, okay, a lot of that is game plan driven and dictated by what the other team is doing. So if this certain personnel is going to give them more problems, then maybe you want to play the game that way. If this personnel maybe, so again, it's about mixing and matching, and it's about what you're going to ask that player to do relative to the particular role. I would say where that, regardless of who that is, where it probably factors the most is probably on 3rd down, potentially, right? And I wouldn't say as much in the red area. The red area is kind of an entity in and of itself, because the red area, it's closed space, tighter space. I would say the run game is involved in the red area. The force happens quicker. The safeties are lower. Everything happens a little bit quicker. So, again, it's whoever that player is, what are you going to do with that player? When are you going to use him? And what's the overall construction of what you're doing offensively? So, again, I would say that kind of goes into that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Nick, with your roster being fluid, are you comfortable with two
Aaron will be next. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead, Mark. Yeah. I'm saying after you.
Well, your roster obviously being fluid, are you comfortable with going with 2 quarterbacks on the 53-man, or is that a fluid situation?
Yeah, again, it's week to week. So again, where's your depth on the team? Is it on the roster or is it off the roster? Okay, then each week you can bring X number of players to the game. And again, with the way the roster, I would say construction, it's similar to last year, right? So we're looking at it as really 65 to 70 players each week that are available. Okay, not necessarily they're all going to play, but you have the ability to bring 2 players from your practice squad each week. So maybe you gain an extra player from that particular group. So each week that could be a little bit different. And again, what are your needs for the game and what's the game plan consist of and what are you trying to accomplish? So I think that, Mark, is probably going to be, a big part of the discussion. And I would say when you look at the league in totality, some teams have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. Some teams have 2 quarterbacks on the roster and 1 or 2 on the practice squad or however they're going to do it, right? And maybe that player that's off the roster might actually get to the game. So, again, I think as we approach it, what we've talked about as a staff, what David and I have talked about, look at the roster in totality, understanding and making sure our players understand you're essentially available to play every Sunday. So you have to prepare accordingly. It's not, well, these guys are on the practice squad, let's throw these guys in a dumpster fire. Like, they have no relevance. They actually are as important as the players that are on the roster. So philosophically, that's our mindset. And I think if our players understand that and our staff understands that, then we can attack the week accordingly and understanding that we have essentially everybody accessible on a weekly basis that could potentially play in the game. Aaron, go ahead.
When you look at what you guys did on defense, obviously it's just the preseason, but when you think about the way you're attacking the football, the turnovers, and kind of sort of the style of play that Lovey's instilled?
Just the question in particular?
Just the way, what do you think about
How the defense is played? No, sorry. Yeah, we've made some plays. We've turned the ball over. We've attacked the football. I think that side of the ball is played with a lot of effort. You have a lot of people around the ball. So, again, really what you want to do is see a continuation of whatever you're doing well. Hopefully that translates and carries over into the regular season. I would say when you look at where you are as a team, just generally speaking, there's some things that you could argue we're doing okay, and there's some other areas, we're not doing as well. So can we maintain our strengths, okay, and can we get the areas maybe that we're not as efficient or may look deficient? Can we make some improvements in those areas? So, again, the first 4 weeks preseason and then the first 4 weeks, I would say, the regular season are going to be about improvement and the ability to maybe get some things fixed. This way you give yourself a chance here, once you get to week 5 or 6. So.
Because you're at the start of rebuilding the team kind of the way you want to. What's your stance on taking on dead money charges on players?
Again, you have to look at everything in totality, everything that comes along with it. I would say from where we started and go back in February to where we are now, we're in a lot better position. I think we're in the middle of the league in terms of cap space that's available. And I think when we started in February, we were 40th of 32 or whatever it was. So, again, we've had to make some changes. So, and again, I think that's a very fluid situation as well, because whatever money you have available now, you have to earmark for injured reserve, practice squad. So let's say the number's 20. Let's just use that as a number. It's really not 20. It's probably 8 to 10 you have to allocate for that. So it really leaves you 10, right? So then let's think about, okay, do we want to use that this year? Do we want to carry it over into next year? So then you start to think about, all right, how many players do we maybe have under contract right now? What does that cap situation look like currently, understanding if that could change? So if you look at it in 2-year windows or 2-year increments, that's probably the appropriate way to do it. And understanding whatever you do in 1 year is going to affect what happens the next year. So, again, you can try to look at it in totality. And, again, you try to allocate resource as best you can and try to mitigate your risk and your downside, understanding that, okay, there's sometimes going to be a cost of doing business, and that just comes with the territory. So, again, try to make good decisions, understanding maybe it doesn't go the way you hope, and then, okay, we just have to move forward and just be cognizant of what's ahead. So we're trying to balance short term, okay, let's get ready for Jacksonville, where are we right now, and also thinking about, all right, maybe there's some things we want to look forward to. I mean, look, we have, a lot of players that are under contract for next year. So obviously we're going to either have to do something with those players or there's going to be another group of players next year. So don't want to really talk about next year, but you're always kind of looking at both, I would say, areas, short term and longer term. Again, I'm not going to comment about what's going to happen, who's going to play, who's going to do what. So I'd say he's on the roster today, and we're going to take it one day at a time. Sarah, go ahead. Go ahead, Sarah. Well, it's a good question. I would say it's probably gone about how we had hoped. We understood when we signed as many players that we did, we weren't going to be able to keep all of them. That's just the process of numbers. So, again, I think the players, took ownership and they realized that it was a competitive situation and they didn't take anything for granted. And, I think we were able to get the best out of the players. They had the right mindset, the right approach. I think our players have done a great job this training camp of staying focused and controlling the things they control, trying to improve as players, understanding that there's players next to them and in the meeting room that, quite frankly, they're competing against. But, again, the attitude, the approach, you guys have talked to some of our players throughout the course of training camp, whether it's KG, Kirko, Mark Ingram, guys that were new to the team and then also guys that were existing from the team. They held each other accountable, and I think they pushed each other, and they realized that, again, it's not friendly competition, but they're competing with the guy next to them, for a job. So, again, I think that overall mindset has permeated the building and permeated the team. And again, I think they understand, this isn't easy. We have to make difficult choices and difficult decisions, and there's relationships that are established along the way between those players. But I think they also realize a lot of them, they've been in the league a long time. This is the cost of doing business, and if they don't have an opportunity here, they're going to have an opportunity somewhere else. And quite frankly, there's some players that aren't here that we released very easily could be back in the building here at some point. So we just try to do the right thing. We just try to be honest with them along the way and just treat them the right way and just give them the opportunity. And just, again, they can agree or disagree with the decision, which, for the most part, everybody understands. But, again, I'd say our players did a really good job of handling the situation and handling training camp. Brandon, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how would you describe your approach with using draft picks as trade capital? You've used draft picks quite a bit since the offseason and preseason. How would you describe the approach to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some of that is a cost of doing business. So how do you get a player on your team? So you have to balance, okay, what is the opportunity cost of getting that player on the team? How can we do it? And again, like anything, it's a risk analysis. So you have to, okay, if we make this decision, this could potentially impact this other decision. So I'd say using late round picks potentially to acquire players to get them in your building, I think it's something we're never going to shy away from. Again, then it's like, well, do you value the draft pick when you give away 6th and 7th round picks? I would say we don't look at it that way. We look at it from the standpoint of, okay, this is the cost of what it would take to get that player here. Do we feel it makes sense? And if it does, we go ahead and do it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So, again, however we have to get players in the building, however we have to get players on the team, so whether it's waiver wire, whether it's a free agent signing, whether it's a trade, whether it's a flip of picks. Again, when you look at, I think there was a handful of trades that were done over the weekend. A lot of them were flip of picks. So then it's really, you're just moving within slots. So, again, I think sometimes people get too caught up in, they gave up a draft pick. Okay, that's fair. That's, everybody has an opinion on that. But if that's what it costs to get the player in the building and you feel like you have to do a risk analysis, then it makes sense to do. We're not going to be afraid to do things. You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So for every decision you make, okay, could it affect another decision? Well, that's okay. We just have to be comfortable with it and just make sure everybody, and I would say this, from David to ownership, they're supportive of that endeavor. So again, as long as we explain why we're doing this and here's how we can get this player on the team or here's why it makes sense to do, then you go ahead and make a decision and, you live with it one way or another.
On the one-year contracts that are on this team, it seems like about half of the players on the roster are in their final year or in their one-year contract. Half of the people that look like they're the starters there. As you're handling that through the season, balancing the long-term future of the roster, how do you approach that and knowing this cap space that you're building?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say our philosophy is always to be flexible and be adaptable. Sometimes people have a hard and fast rule like, okay, if we don't do this by September 1st, we're not going to talk to you, okay? I think we're going to be a little bit more open-minded. I'd say some players and agents are more open than others. Sometimes players want to focus on football. That's okay. Whatever we feel makes the most sense. And again, we're going to have very organic discussions and be authentic about it and tell them our intentions. And some are willing to engage. Others aren't willing to engage. No problem. Okay. Whether it's now, whether it's October, whether it's November, whether it's in February, whether it's March. Again, whenever those conversations seem to make sense and take place, we're not going to be afraid to have those. I'd say that's just more philosophically what we believe in. Again, other people don't approach it that way, but again, to each his own, and every team has a different way of operating and the philosophy as it relates to that. Randy, go ahead.
I was going to ask you about the decisions of running back. You guys
optimistic that this particular group can produce to the level that you guys expect on this?
Yeah, again, I think this is about where's your depth, how do you carry your depth, and I think one thing that you have to factor in is, okay, when you release a player off the roster, okay, and you put them on a waiver wire, you're exposing them, and you may or may not be able to get that player back. So again, I wouldn't say that's always the case of why you keep a player on the roster. I would say other players earned the opportunity to be on the roster with their performance. So again, I would say go back to, I think, with Brooks's question or another question, you're kind of looking at both the short term and then maybe thinking about, maybe a year from now. So again, what does that look like? Okay. And again, understanding that this is all very fluid, but I'd say, we have a lot of, I would say, numbers on paper. Obviously, we can't put 5 running backs on the field unless we're going to run the wishbone like Oklahoma did, but we're not going to do that. I mean, everybody thinks we are, but we're not. But so again, you can only take so many to the game, and it's just about how do you keep your depth on the roster? Do you carry it off the roster? You put it on the practice squad? So again, I would say that's probably more the thought process, more than, we want 26 running backs on the team.
Nick, I'm just checking with you. Anthony Miller, when do you expect him back? Do you expect him back?
He's making progress. I think he's day to day. At some point we'll probably have a little more information, be able to make a decision. But I would expect him to play at some point this season. I think that's fair.
Nick, having watched this team through training camp and the preseason, built this roster, and obviously it's in flux, it's fluid. What are your expectations for this team and this roster in your first season?
Yeah, I think it's probably, again, I'll probably put my foot in my mouth for saying this, but it's not as much outcome-oriented as process-oriented, and that's what we're trying to do and build. Again, what we're trying to do is, again, try to create a foundation, a culture where we've got players that are tough-minded, that are selfless, they're going to go out there, work out every day, and they're going to compete their ass off. Like, that's what we're trying to do, okay? How does that manifest itself on the field on Sunday? Again, that's going to be about execution and how we play. So, again, I think the attitude and the effort, Brian, of our team has been good. We've executed at some times better than others. And again, ultimately, wins and losses are dictated by how you perform on Sunday. And then there's certain things in the game that you're going to have to try to make sure that you handle, whether it's don't turn the ball over, limit the penalties, play good in the kicking game, play good situationally, third down in the red area and short yardage and goal line. I would say in the end, that's going to ultimately dictate, if we win or lose the game. Okay. I think I looked at this, since 2017. Again, just looking over a 5-year period, I think when we didn't turn the ball over, the teams won almost 80% of the games. Okay, so again, if you just don't turn the ball over and don't give it to them, you enhance your ability to potentially win the game. So again, can we go out there and execute, and can we make enough plays to win? And again, each week it's going to be different, and there's going to be a challenge every week. Every team we play is going to present its own set of challenges, and we're either going to be good enough and handle them, or we're not. Not to make it oversimplify it, but I think as we approach it, I think that's the thought process, and I think that's the mindset of our team and our players. And again, it's just try to go out there, try to improve each day, try to work hard. And again, I think like we talked about a little bit earlier, if we can make some incremental improvements on some of the areas right now we're maybe deficient, maybe that gives us a better opportunity once we get on the field on Sundays.
Can you give us your evaluation of Mills, and what are you interested in Cam?
It's 2 questions. Sorry. No, yeah, we'll get one more in there. No, I'd say like most players, there's been some good plays, there's been some bad plays. I think everybody has them, whether you're a rookie or a 10-year veteran. Okay, I think the most important thing for many players is consistency and being able to perform your job, at a consistent level, play after play. Look, everybody's going to have some bad plays, and I think as long as we're improving, as long as making some progress, I think that's the most important thing. But the players that are on the team, they're here for a reason. We're pleased with their progress. Is it perfect? No, not every play. But again, as long as they're moving in the right direction and they're making improvements and taking the coaching, that's the most important thing. To your second question, John, I would say again, we're always going to look at what's out there alternative-wise. And again, if there's a player that we feel makes sense for our team, we'll consider it. If there's not, then we won't. And again, whether it's now, whether it's 2 weeks from now, whether it's a month from now, we'll just try to make a smart decision about players that come on our team. Okay.
You said you'd be open-minded about that.
We'll get one more because you haven't had a question. So go ahead, Mark.
Okay. You said you'd be open-minded about guys on one-year deals from the last year of their contract. Can you offer any general thoughts about your approach with Justin Reed since he's going to the final year of his contract?
Yeah, again, we look at everybody's situation. Again, we just kind of take it one day at a time, and I think that's a case-by-case basis. Every situation is different. We're never going to comment, I would say, publicly on any of those discussions or what's going to take place. Justin's a good player. He's been a good player here for, a number of years now. So, again, got to take everything in totality, and in the end, just try to make the decision that makes sense for our team both now and in the future. Okay. One more, last one, I think, Omar. Yep.
When you entered camp, you had a plan of what you wanted to achieve. Can you talk about how you feel about how this camp went as a part of the process?
Yeah, I think everybody, our staff, and David and I, look, we talk about the team every day. We talk about roster decisions every day, and we kind of look at and evaluate everything every day. So I think from where we started to where we are now, I think we've made some progress, as a team and an organization. There's a lot of cool things kind of going on behind the scenes in the building. Our players have embraced being here. You talked to a lot of players. I think KG made a comment the other day about just how much he loves being here. It's a credit to what the players have done, and what we're trying to do is support those players and facilitate their growth and development and give them an environment that is conducive where they can maximize their performance on a day-to-day basis. So whether it's resource allocation, providing resources in the building, whatever we need to do to help them be successful, I think that's our job and that's what we're here to do. So, again, I think David and the staff have done a great job to this point. Again, it's going to come down to what happens on Sundays. Nobody's I'm not ignorant, and we're not immune to that, okay? But I think for where we are right now, I think everybody feels good about where we are. We're excited about the start of the season here in a couple of weeks, and about the opportunity that's in front of us. So we're making progress. I'd say we got a long way to go, okay? We have a lot of work in front of us, okay? And nothing's going to happen overnight, okay? So we're just going to take it one day at a time, try to work as hard as we can, as best we can on a day-to-day basis, and then, we'll see where we end up here as we move forward. Okay?